You're a useless, stupid old man. Those words cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. They didn't come from a stranger, not from some cold world outside. They came from my own flesh and blood. My son, Marcus, the boy I had carried on my shoulders through parades, whose school projects I stayed up nights helping with, whose first scraped knee I patched up with trembling hands. He was standing in front of me now, eyes filled with fury and disgust, shouting at me as if I were nothing. The sound of his voice thundered across the dining room. Plates rattled, glasses trembled. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto the table. It felt like the entire world paused just long enough to let the pain sink in. Then came the slap, sharp, loud, unmistakable. It wasn't just the sting of skin against skin, it was betrayal in its purest form. For a moment I just stood there, my head turned slightly from the impact, staring at the floor. The laughter of his friends, the quiet gasps from the corner, the ticking of the old wall clock. Every sound felt distant. He didn't stop there. You can't even take care of yourself anymore. You're worthless, he spat, his voice breaking with the kind of arrogance only youth and ignorance can fuel. I don't want you in my house. My house. I raised my eyes to him slowly, watching his chest heave, his nostrils flare, the vein on his temple pulsing. He believed what he said. Truly believed it. That's what hurt most. I looked around the house. My house. The one I built with my wife before she passed. The walls still carried the faint smell of her favorite jasmine candles. The photo of her smiling face hung on the wall right above the mantel. The same wall where, years ago, Marcus would tape up his report cards for me to see. Now, that same sun was standing beneath her picture, veins bulging, screaming at me like I was dirt under his shoe. I felt the burn of tears threaten to rise, but I didn't let them fall. I refused to give him that satisfaction. My pride, and my quiet, weathered pride, wouldn't allow it. I reached for my old cane, the one with the carved walnut handle. The chair scraped against the floor as I pushed it back, slow and steady. My silence filled the room heavier than his words ever could. Get out, he barked again. I took one long look at him, memorizing the face that once beamed with innocence. Then I nodded, just once. No words, no anger, only silence. That silence frightened him for a brief second. I could see it in his eyes and a flicker of uncertainty. But his pride smothered it quickly. He turned away, muttering something under his breath. I walked to the door, each step deliberate. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, like they were protesting the injustice. When I reached the doorway, I paused and glanced back. His friends were still standing there, half awkward, half amused. Young men. None of them knew what real life had in store for them yet. As I stepped out, the night air hit my face, cold, honest. For the first time in years, the air outside felt freer than the air inside that house. I closed the door behind me gently. The slap still echoed in my ears, but I felt something shifting inside. Something steady, ancient, patient. I walked down the driveway slowly, the crunch of gravel under my shoes steady, grounding me in every breath. The world was quiet except for the hum of the streetlight flickering above. Halfway down the street I stopped, reached into my coat pocket. My phone buzzed softly as I unlocked it. There was only one number I needed. It rang once, twice, then a deep, steady voice answered. Mr. Harris. Yes, I replied quietly, my voice calm but firm. Activate it. Understood, sir, came the reply. No questions, no hesitation. That's the kind of loyalty money can't buy. Only respect can. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. My hands trembled slightly, not from age but from restrained fury. There was no shouting, no vengeance in my heart, just justice. I had spent years building a safety net so strong that no betrayal could ever tear it apart. I had seen too much of the world to be fooled by a young man's pride. As I walked, I passed the old oak tree at the end of the street, the same tree where I used to push Marcus on a swing. I smiled faintly at the memory. He was 4 years old then. Every push would make him laugh louder, his small hands clutching the ropes tightly. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" he would shout. Now he had pushed me, not on a swing, but out of his life, but life has a strange way of returning the same motion. The higher you push arrogance, the harder it falls. By the time I reached the corner, a black car rolled to a stop beside me. The door opened smoothly. My driver, a tall man in a dark coat, stepped out and nodded respectfully. "Good evening," "Sir," he said, his tone low, professional. "Evening," I replied, stepping in. The car smelled of leather and faint cologne. The kind of silence that fills expensive cars wasn't awkward. It was powerful. As we pulled away, I looked back one last time at the faint glow of the house through the trees. My house. My legacy. My silence. The driver spoke again after a moment. "Would you like to proceed with the notice delivery tonight, Mr. Harris?" I nodded. "Yes, let's make it official." He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. Every detail was already in motion. Papers signed years ago, trusts locked, ownerships registered under my name alone. Marcus thought the house was his because I let him believe it. He never once bothered to look past the surface. I watched the city lights pass by, glowing, distant, indifferent. The slap still burned faintly, but it no longer hurt. It reminded me of something deeper, the cost of silence and the strength it hides. I leaned back, my hands folded over my cane, and whispered to myself, "He thinks I lost everything tonight. But he's about to learn that everything he has was never his to begin with." As the car disappeared into the night, the silence returned once more, not weak, not empty, but ready because 30 minutes from now, that same silence would knock on his door. The morning came quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The city was waking up, but in my mind it was still last night. That voice, that slap, that cold look in my son's eyes replaying in endless loops. I hadn't slept much, but not out of sadness. Out of thought. The early sun painted long gold streaks across the windows of my apartment downtown, the same one I bought years ago when I first started my company. I hadn't been here in months, maybe years. It still smelled faintly of cedar and black coffee. Everything was neat, organized, quiet, just how I liked it. My cane rested against the side of the leather chair. I sat down slowly, poured myself a cup of coffee, and listened to the faint hum of the city far below. Every sound, the distant horns, the shuffle of people heading to work, reminded me of the rhythm of life. A rhythm I'd spent decades mastering. My phone buzzed softly. "Sir," came the calm voice of Gerald, my lawyer. "I just wanted to confirm. You've authorized full retrieval of property under Clause 9. "Yes," I replied, steady and slow. "Everything under my name. The house, the vehicles, the accounts linked to that address. Freeze it all." There was a brief pause. "Understood, Mr. Harris. It'll be handled within the hour." I ended the call and let the silence return. For a moment I closed my eyes. The face of my late wife Angela came to mind. Gentle smile, eyes that could calm a storm. I could almost hear her whisper, "Don't let pride destroy what we built." "I'm not, Angie," I whispered back. "I'm just letting the truth speak for itself. That's the thing about truth, is it doesn't shout. It waits." By noon the storm had begun. Across town, in that same house that once echoed with laughter and now rang with arrogance, my son Marcus was pacing near the window. The sunlight spilled across the living room, but his face was dark with confusion. His phone buzzed once, twice, then again. He picked it up, annoyance sharp in his voice. "What now?" A pause. Then his expression changed. "Wait, what do you mean it's frozen?" He straightened, pacing faster. His friend on the other end tried to explain, but Marcus wasn't listening. His tone turned frantic. No, that's not right." "That's my money." I live here. It's under my name, except..." It wasn't. Within minutes he received another call. This time from the bank. Then one from the Homeowners Association. Then a knock on the door. A man in a crisp suit stood there holding a brown envelope. "Delivery for Mr. Marcus Harris." Marcus grabbed it, tore it open. His hands trembled as he read the first line. Notice of ownership termination. His lips moved, barely forming words. "What the hell is this?" He read further. His father's name. My name, written in bold. The house, the property, the accounts, all listed under me. Everything legally mine. Everything he had mocked me over. Claimed as his own. The reality began to sink in. He slumped onto the couch, the paper shaking in his hands. No, this can't be happening." His friends, the same ones who laughed when he humiliated me, stood nearby in awkward silence. They didn't laugh now. They shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. One mumbled something about needing to leave and slipped out the door. That's the thing about pride. It attracts a crowd when you're loud, but when silence arrives with truth, pride always stands alone. Meanwhile, I sat in my office downtown, sipping my coffee as I watched the light fade through the tall windows. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. Older, yes, but not broken. There was strength in stillness. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Harris," said the receptionist, "a call from Officer Daniels. Should I transfer it?" "Yes." A click, then the officer's calm voice came through. "Evening, sir. We've confirmed the order on your property. It's complete. There was some resistance, but everything's settled now. Would you like to file a restraining extension?" I thought for a long second. My fingers tapped the desk rhythmically. "No," I said finally. "Let him face himself first. That's punishment enough." "Understood." The line went dead. Outside, the city lights began to flicker to life. From my window, I could see the skyline, 1,000 tiny fires glowing against the dusk. My reflection overlapped with it. A tired old man who once thought love could shield him from betrayal. But love doesn't protect you from pain. It just gives that pain meaning. My silence had done what my words never could. It showed him the cost of disrespect. Not through revenge, but revelation. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. From an unknown number, "Dad. Please, I didn't know. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long while. No anger rose. No satisfaction either. Just quiet understanding that sometimes people must lose everything before they understand what they had. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some lessons aren't taught in words. I stood, grabbed my coat and stepped out into the night. The cold air brushed against my skin, calm and sharp. I walked to the corner cafe, the same one Marcus and I used to visit when he was a child. The owner recognized me instantly. "Mr. Harris. Been a long time." "Too long," I said softly, smiling faintly. As I sipped my coffee, I looked out the window. Across the street, a father and his young son were laughing, their hands sticky from melting ice cream. The boy stumbled, and the father caught him before he fell. The simple act tugged at something deep within me. That's what I had wanted for Marcus, not wealth, not control, but humility. The ability to appreciate the hands that held him up before life knocked him down. The night deepened. The cafe lights flickered warm and steady. I took one final sip and whispered to myself, "Let the world do what I couldn't. Let him learn." The wind outside picked up, carrying with it the quiet hum of justice. Not loud, not cruel, just inevitable, because when pride becomes deaf, silence becomes the teacher, and my silence was only beginning to speak. The following morning, I woke up before the sun had a chance to paint the sky. Old habits die hard. Decades of early mornings, of running my own company, of taking care of everyone but myself. But that day felt different. Quiet, still, heavy. I sat by the window of my small downtown apartment, the one no one knew I still owned. The city below was just beginning to stir. A delivery truck hummed past, and the faint aroma of fresh bread from the bakery next door slipped through the cracked window. It reminded me of when Marcus was a child, how he'd wait by the table grinning for his toast with butter and jam. Back then he'd call me Super Dad. Somewhere along the line that changed to Old Man. People always say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. Time just teaches you how to live with them. My phone rang. I expected it. Gerald, my lawyer again. "Mr. Harris, everything is now officially processed. Marcus no longer has access to any joint assets. The property and accounts are secured in your name, and the authorities responded to your report regarding the misuse of company funds." My eyes stayed fixed on the slow sunrise creeping across the skyline. "Proceed," I said softly. "Understood." After the call ended, I placed the phone down gently on the table. I wasn't angry, not even vengeful. I was tired, not in body but in spirit. Because when your own child raises a hand against you, the wound isn't on the skin. It's carved deep into your soul. By noon, the house that had once been filled with laughter was filled with chaos. Marcus stood in the living room, his voice trembling now, not from rage, but panic. He was pacing again, phone pressed against his ear, shouting at whoever would listen. "What do you mean it's gone?" "No, that's impossible." His tone cracked between disbelief and desperation. "My name's on the account. I paid for—" He stopped mid-sentence when the man from the bank, the same one who had known me for decades, stood calmly in front of him. "Mr. Marcus Harris," he said firmly, "as per legal ownership records, all assets connected to this estate fall under Mr. Elijah Harris." Marcus blinked, stunned. "My father?" "Yes, sir. Your father. he stuttered, trying to find words that didn't come. No, that can't. He's old. He doesn't even... The man cut him off gently. He does, and he always did. Those words hit him harder than anything I could have said. He sank into the nearest chair, staring at the floor. His pride, that armor he wore so proudly, had cracked wide open. I imagined the silence that must have filled that room after they left. The way he must have sat there, surrounded by the weight of his own arrogance. For years I let him believe I had nothing. I dressed simply, spoke softly, lived humbly. Not because I was poor, but because I wanted him to understand that worth isn't measured in money or clothes. But pride blinds people, and blindness eventually brings pain. Later that evening, Gerald called again. It's done, Mr. Harris. The audit revealed he transferred funds from your company into his own side accounts. The authorities have been informed. They'll handle it, I sighed. Do what's right, Gerald. Don't go easy on him because of me. He hesitated. You sure, sir? I'm sure. He needs to understand the cost of betrayal. After the call, I sat quietly for a long while. The apartment lights glowed soft against the wooden floor. I took a deep breath, running my fingers through my grey beard, a little longer now, rough with time and patience. My reflection in the window looked back at me, calm, aged, but not defeated. Outside, the evening was falling over the city. Streetlights flickered on one by one, like small promises against the coming dark. I decided to take a walk. My cane tapped lightly against the sidewalk as I moved through familiar streets. People greeted me with nods, smiles. To them, I was just another old man in a coat. They didn't know I had once been the founder of Harris & Co., a company my son had been so desperate to control. As I passed a small diner, the waitress at the counter smiled warmly. Evening, Mr. Harris, coffee? I smiled back. Just the usual, thank you. She poured me a cup, and I sat by the window, looking at the people passing by. Young men rushing with briefcases, couples laughing, children tugging their parents' hands. I thought about Marcus again. How he used to cling to my arm like that when he was 5. How he used to say, Daddy, when I grow up, I'll take care of you. And now here we were. The sound of my phone vibrating broke the thought. A message flashed on the screen. Marcus. Dad? Please call me. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond, not yet. Some silences speak louder than forgiveness, because forgiveness without realization is wasted breath. He had to feel the emptiness he created, the echo of his own disrespect bouncing back toward him. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was standing on the porch of the house he once called his. 2 police cars were parked outside. The officers were speaking to him calmly, but his face was pale, trembling. You're under investigation for misuse of funds and fraud. Mr. Harris, one of them said, voice firm but measured. Marcus stuttered. You can't arrest me. My father, The officer nodded slowly. Your father filed the report. That's when he froze completely. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed like thunder in the cold evening air. Inside the car, as they drove him away, Marcus looked out the window and saw me. I stood across the street, silent, hands resting on my cane. Our eyes met for one long second that stretched into eternity. No words were exchanged. None were needed. He knew. And as the sirens faded into the distance, I turned and walked away, the wind brushing gently against my face. That night, I stood by my window again, looking out at the sleeping city. My reflection looked back, older, wiser, lonelier, but not broken. Never broken, because a father's silence isn't weakness. It's history, patience, and love, disguised as stillness. And tonight my silence had spoken louder than any shout ever could. The following morning carried a strange calm, the kind that lingers right before a storm. I woke before dawn, just as I always did, though sleep hadn't been kind to me. The small apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, a mix of solitude and quiet dignity. The city was stretching itself awake outside, the hum of life returning as the sun began to tease the horizon. I poured myself a cup of coffee, staring at the faint steam rising from it. My hands, wrinkled and steady, told stories my son had forgotten to read. Every scar, every line, every callus, they were from years of building a life that he now thought he had created himself. I sipped slowly, the bitter taste grounding me in reality. That silence after years of shouting matches was almost comforting. There were no insults, no slammed doors, just peace. And yet, Somewhere deep inside, I felt the ache only a father could feel. That quiet heartbreak when you realize your son doesn't just misunderstand you, he disrespects you. My phone buzzed on the table. Gerald again. Mr. Harris. His calm, professional voice filled the air. The process has moved forward. The assets, accounts, and ownership titles are all officially under your name. Marcus has been completely removed as an authorized party. I didn't say a word for a moment. Then softly, "Good. Leave everything else in motion." There was a pause. "And the report, sir?" I looked out the window at the city bathed in golden light. "Proceed." I hung up, setting the phone down beside my coffee. My heart didn't race. It didn't even tremble. I had long stopped feeling anger. What I felt now was clarity, a calm that only comes when truth finally begins to rise through years of deception. Across town, my son Marcus was waking up to a world that no longer bent to his will. He stumbled out of bed, groggy and irritable, the sound of his expensive watch clinking against the nightstand. He reached for his phone, scrolling through unread messages from the bank, the company, and his so-called friends. Each message carried a variation of the same theme: confusion, decline notices, account restrictions. One email stood out: immediate action required, ownership transfer notification. His face twisted in disbelief. He rushed to his laptop, logging into his accounts with trembling hands. The numbers he expected, the comfort of controls, were gone. His account balance stared back at him, nearly empty. He slammed his hand on the table. "No, no, no! This can't be happening." Just then, his phone rang. It was the same bank manager who had spoken to me only days before. Marcus answered sharply. "Yes? What's going on with my account? Why are all the transactions blocked?" The voice on the other end was polite but firm. "Mr. Harris, our records indicate you are no longer an authorized owner on these accounts. The primary and sole account holder is Mr. Elijah Harris." Marcus froze. "My father." He's not. He couldn't even finish the sentence. "I'm sorry, sir," the banker continued, "but all legal documentation confirms Mr. Elijah Harris retains full ownership. You'll need to contact him directly if you wish to appeal or request clarification." Marcus ended the call abruptly, his chest heaving with disbelief. He couldn't process it. All the years he'd spent pretending he was in charge, all the bragging about his company, his house, his life, it was all built on his father's quiet generosity. Now, the empire he thought he ruled was gone in the time it took his father to make a single call. He tried reaching me, of course, multiple times, but I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the sharpest reply a father can give. By mid-morning, Marcus was pacing around the living room, the same one where he had once shouted at me, calling me a useless old man before throwing me out. Now that room felt colder, emptier. Every expensive piece of furniture mocked him, silent reminders of what he never truly owned. A knock on the door startled him. Two men in suits stepped in, carrying folders. One of them introduced himself as a financial investigator from my company. "Mr. Marcus Harris," he began, "we've identified irregularities in several transfers made under your authorization. We'll need your cooperation to proceed." Marcus laughed nervously, waving them off. "You must be mistaken. I don't see. My father handled that kind of thing." The man cut him off calmly. "Your father has already provided the documentation. Everything's clear from his side." The words hit Marcus like a brick. He did?" "Yes, sir." The man nodded. "He's been remarkably patient, I must say. Most people wouldn't have waited this long to act." Marcus's throat tightened. His arrogance was slipping, replaced by a creeping dread. He tried to smile, but his voice cracked as he muttered, "I'll fix this. I'll talk to him." But he knew deep down there was no fixing this. Some things can't be undone once the truth has settled in. Meanwhile, I was standing on the balcony of my apartment, watching the world move below. Children laughed, cars honked, and life went on, unaffected by the silent war between father and son that was unfolding in the quiet corners of the city. I thought about calling Marcus back. Part of me still wanted to. Every father carries that instinct, to protect, to forgive, to reach out, even when the hand you offer has been bitten before. But then I remembered the sting of that slap. The look in his eyes that night, not of anger but of disgust. The way he called me useless, as though I were nothing but dust beneath his shoes. That memory silenced my sympathy. Some lessons can't be spoken. They must be lived. As the evening shadows grew long, I got another call, this time from the police department. Mr. Harris, this is Officer Daniels. We've executed the report you filed. Your son has been taken into custody for questioning regarding the misuse of company funds. There was a pause on the line. Then he added softly, I thought you should know. I closed my eyes for a long moment, inhaling deeply. Thank you, officer. When I hung up, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I simply whispered to the empty room, I warned you, son. You thought my silence meant weakness. But silence is where patience lives. And patience always wins. That night, as the streetlights flickered outside and the world went to sleep, I sat by the window again, the same coffee mug in hand, now cold, untouched. Somewhere downtown, my son sat in a cold cell, staring at the floor, probably thinking of all the things he'd said, all the pride he'd worn like armor, and for the first time in a long time, I knew he finally heard the silence. The next morning, the news spread faster than I could have ever imagined. Even before I left my apartment, messages were flooding my phone. My old employees, old friends, even people from church, all had heard something. Marcus Harris, the son everyone once admired, had been arrested for fraud and misconduct. I didn't need to turn on the television to know what they were saying. I could already picture the headlines. CEO's son accused of financial misuse, investigation ongoing. The same reporters who had once written glowing articles about the young visionary were now tearing him apart, dissecting every rumor, every arrogant quote he'd ever made. I set my coffee down slowly and looked at the framed photo on the wall, the one from 10 years ago. Marcus stood beside me, smiling, one arm over my shoulder, proud and bright-eyed. He had dreams back then, not greed, not ego, just dreams. I ran my fingers along the glass of that photo. When did that boy disappear? Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had changed. But inside my chest, something heavy shifted. I wasn't happy, not in the way people expected me to be. There was no satisfaction in seeing your child fall. There was only that deep, aching sadness that comes from realizing your love couldn't save them from themselves. Still, consequences had to be faced. I had spent my whole life teaching Marcus that discipline and humility mattered more than pride. He had chosen to ignore that lesson, and now life was giving him the harsh version of it. I walked over to the small table near my front door. On it sat an envelope sealed neatly, with his name written in my handwriting, Marcus. I had written that letter the night before, long before the police came. I had known where things were heading, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew him. I knew how far he would go before realizing what he had lost. Inside that letter wasn't anger. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was truth, the kind of truth only time and silence can teach. Son, it began, you built your world on my shoulders, but you forgot to look down and see whose hands were holding you up. You thought your strength was yours alone, and you mocked the silence that raised you. I didn't stay quiet because I was weak. I stayed quiet because I wanted you to hear yourself, to see who you were becoming. Now life will speak to you in a way I no longer can. I folded the letter back into its envelope and slipped it into my coat pocket. There were things left to do. Later that afternoon, I drove across town to my company's headquarters, the same building Marcus used to walk into like he owned it, the same building he had once told people he did own. When I stepped out of my car, the employees standing near the entrance fell silent. They had seen the news, they knew. Some lowered their heads out of respect. Others looked away, ashamed. "Morning, Mr. Harris," one of the security guards said quietly. I nodded back. "Morning, Leonard." Inside, the air was thick with unease. My assistant, Valerie, met me at the elevator. "Sir, the board is ready for you." "Everyone's waiting upstairs," I smiled faintly. "Let's not make them wait, then." The boardroom was full. Men and women who had known both me and Marcus for years. Some had believed in him, others had doubted him, but none had expected this. As I entered, all conversation stopped. "Mr. Harris," the chairman stood up, visibly tense. "We want to first express our regret for what happened." "We had no idea," I raised a hand gently. "You don't need to apologize. The company isn't broken. The people who forgot its values are." They nodded, almost relieved to hear calm instead of fury. I looked around the table, my voice low but steady. This business was built on discipline, not pride. It's time we return to that. Marcus made mistakes, but those mistakes don't define this company. Our response does. One of the younger directors spoke up. Will there be charges, sir? I hesitated, then spoke quietly. Let the law do what it must. But when this is over, he's still my son. The room fell silent again. They all understood. After the meeting, I returned to my office, the same office Marcus used to visit as a boy, running his small fingers over my desk, pretending to be the boss. I could almost hear his laughter echoing faintly in the air. I sat in the chair, leaned back and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of both love and justice pressing on me at once. That evening, I received a call from Officer Daniels again. His voice was calm, respectful. Mr. Harris, your son is being held temporarily. We'll likely release him soon pending the investigation. Would you like to speak with him? I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched so long, he probably thought the call had disconnected. Finally, I said quietly, no, not yet. Let him sit with himself first. Daniels sighed softly. I understand. I hung up and stared out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my son was sitting in a cold, bright room, probably wondering how everything had crumbled so fast. And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to understand what real power looks like. It's not in shouting. It's not in control. It's not in money or status. Real power is in restraint, in silence, in knowing you could destroy someone but choosing to let them face themselves instead. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank screen, waiting. I began typing a statement for the press, calm, professional, without emotion. Effective immediately, Marcus Harris has been relieved of all duties pending investigation. The company remains stable under the leadership of Elijah Harris. When I finished, I saved the file and closed the laptop. I poured myself another cup of coffee. This one finally tasted right. I walked out onto my balcony, the evening breeze brushing against my face. Down below, the streets buzzed with life, unaware of the quiet transformation happening in one father's heart. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't grieving, I was just breathing again. And for the first time in years, that felt enough. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tomorrow would bring headlines. Tomorrow might even bring him to my door, but tonight was silence. And silence had finally returned home. 3 weeks passed. The headlines had started to fade, and the city's gossip found new names to chew on. But for me, the silence had become my companion again, soft, steady, and earned. I had stopped expecting anything. I didn't wait for apologies, for tears, or for redemption. I had seen enough of the world to know that regret only blooms when pride finally starves. And my son's pride had been well fed for too long. That Sunday morning, I was sitting on my porch, the wooden chair creaking softly beneath my weight. The sky was grey, clouds hanging low like the world was holding its breath. I was reading the newspaper, not the business section, not the politics, just the obituaries. I found peace there, not in death, but in the honesty of life's final record. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps on the gravel path leading to my porch. Slow, hesitant. Each step carried a weight that words could never hold. I didn't look up right away. I knew that sound. The shuffle of worn-out sneakers, the rhythm of someone who had forgotten confidence. Dad. The voice cracked halfway through. I lifted my eyes slowly. Marcus stood at the edge of the porch, thinner, tired, the glow of arrogance drained from his face. He looked smaller somehow, like the world had finally pressed its hands against him and forced him to kneel. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair, once perfectly styled, was unkempt. His eyes were swollen, not just from lack of sleep, but from a kind of pain no sleep could cure. Marcus, I said quietly. He swallowed hard, staring at the floor. They let me out yesterday. I heard, I said simply. He nodded, then fidgeted with his hands, something he hadn't done since he was a boy. I lost everything, Dad, the company, the house, the cars, even the people I thought were my friends. They all disappeared. I didn't answer. The wind rustled through the trees behind us, whispering softly between the silence. He took another step closer. I came here to say— Don't say it, I interrupted gently. He froze. What? I folded the newspaper carefully and set it on the table beside me. Whatever you came to say, you don't need to. Words are easy. You used plenty of them before. What matters now is what you'll do next. His shoulders slumped. I don't even know where to start. I looked out toward the road. Then maybe start where you ended. He blinked, confused. What do you mean? I finally turned my full gaze toward him. Calm, firm, not angry, not pitying. You threw me out of my house, Marcus. You called me useless. You forgot what built your world. Start by remembering. He lowered his head, tears starting to roll down his face. I didn't know they'd arrest me. I didn't know they'd find out about the papers. I thought I could handle everything on my own. I leaned back slowly. That's the curse of pride, thinking I is stronger than we. He sniffled, his voice breaking. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I was stupid. I studied him for a long time. The apology didn't feel like a performance. It felt heavy, real. The kind that scrapes through the throat because it's been buried too deep. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked softly, reminders of the years I had carried both our weights. I stepped down from the porch until I was standing right in front of him. He didn't dare meet my eyes. Marcus, I said quietly, when you were little, do you remember that night you got lost in the crowd at the fair? He blinked, startled. Yeah. You ran off laughing, thinking I'd be right behind you. But you didn't look back, and when you realized I wasn't there, you panicked. You cried, called my name. And when I found you, you clung to my leg and said you'd never run off again. He nodded slowly, wiping his face. You ran off again, son, I said softly. Only this time the crowd wasn't at the fair. It was the world. And when it turned on you, you finally looked back. He broke then, his chest trembling, his tears falling freely. He fell to his knees right there on the dirt path, his voice shaking. Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I looked down at him. My son, the man I had raised, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders. For a long moment I said nothing. Then I whispered, you don't need to deserve it. You just need to learn from it. He stayed there, silent, his forehead resting against the ground, the weight of all his mistakes pressing down on him. I turned and walked back up the porch steps. My chair groaned softly as I sat down again. He lifted his head. You're not going to say anything else? I shook my head. No, I've already said enough for a lifetime. The rest is yours to live. For a long time he didn't move. The silence between us stretched, not empty but full of everything we hadn't said. Finally he stood up slowly and whispered, Can I come back? Home? I looked at him, really looked. The boy I raised was still in there, hidden behind all the ruin. But the house behind me wasn't just wood and brick anymore. It was peace. And peace, once lost, is not so easily shared again. Not yet, I said softly. But one day, maybe. His lips trembled, but he nodded. I understand. He turned and walked down the path, his steps heavy, his shadow long across the dirt. As he disappeared around the corner, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The wind carried the smell of rain, the promise of something new, not forgiveness. Not vengeance, but change. The sky cracked open, a thin streak of light cutting through the grey clouds, landing right where Marcus had stood. And for the first time in years, I whispered to myself, maybe that's enough. Inside, the clock ticked softly, steady, patient, alive. Outside, the world kept turning. Unaware of the quiet redemption that had taken place on an old man's porch, I looked down at my hands, the same hands that built, protected, provided, and finally let go. And then, for the first time since that night, I closed my eyes, not in pain, not in exhaustion, but in peace. The silence around me was no longer heavy. It was home.